Welcome to Fear and Greed, business news you can use today. Cigarettes and vapes cause the federal government budget, health and crime headaches. Household spending surges and the federal government concedes it won't hit its target for 1.2 million homes by the end of the decade. Plus, Spotify releases its most played artists and songs, and Aussie tourist favourite Thailand relaxes rules around alcohol. It is Friday, the 5th of December 2025. I'm Michael Thompson, and that's quite a mixed bag, Sean Aylmer.
That's quite a mixed bag, Sean Aylmer. That's it.
Yeah.
A very mixed show, a mixed bag of a show, Michael.
It really is something for everyone today. The main story this morning, Sean, the federal government has run into an economic dilemma when it comes to tobacco sales. They've been taxed so much, so heavily, that the illegal market has surged, and that's hurting legitimate retailers. And at the same time, cigarettes are so available and so cheap on the black market, the fear is that smoking rates, which the government's been working hard to get lower over a long period of time, will actually rise.
Legal cigarette and tobacco sales fell 29% in the year through to the end of September, according to the Bureau of Statistics. Now, a bunch of retailers, including IGA/Metcash, Woolies, Coles, Ampol, Viva Energy, which runs Shell, they've talked about falling revenue from tobacco sales. Illegal tobacco sales are surging, with convenience stores selling a pack of 25 cigarettes for as little as $16 compared to a retail price of $50. Now, of that $50, $34 goes in taxes. A report by the Centre for Independent Studies says the federal government's tobacco tax has reached the point of diminishing returns. Rising excise rates, rather than diminishing demand, actually has incentivised illicit supply. Now, the federal government's tobacco excise revenue has more than halved since 2019-20. It's forecast to continue to decline. You'd think that's a good thing. You would hope that was a good thing. But the problem is it's now got this black market absolutely humming.
And even more concerning, I'd say, is the instances of smoking among young Australians is rising.
Yeah, so Roy Morgan data released earlier in the year showed 17.4% of Australians aged 18 and over smoked or vaped, similar to levels a decade ago. However, the number of younger Australians aged 18 to 24 smoking or vaping had risen to 27.8%, according to the Fin Review. There's also the problem of crime that comes alongside illegal sales. There have been fire bombings in Victoria where rival gangs have fought for control over the trade. In New South Wales and South Australia, governments have introduced tough new penalties for selling illegal tobacco, but the problem remains. Now, Australian Federal Police Commissioner Chrissy Barrett was in Senate estimates this week. She said authorities had seized $33 million in proceeds from crime-linked tobacco since June. 5.8 million cigarettes were seized in July. 84,000 vapes were seized in July. Spending on cigarettes and tobacco in Australia, this is the legal side of it, peaked in 1981. They spent about $98 billion in today's dollars. It's down to about $15 billion in the legal tobacco market. Now we have a target of less than 5% of the population smoking by 2030, about 8.5% now. However, we're just not getting there, and it is the number one cause of deaths in middle-aged Australians. It's responsible for 66 Australians dying a day, 24,000 people annually. The leading cause of preventable death in Australia. This is a tax policy that has well and truly outlived its usefulness.
And you wonder, kind of, is the solution, if not to change the taxation side of it, is it a greater crackdown because on borders, for instance, because a very large percentage of it is being imported illegally. Only a small percentage is actually being grown domestically and manufactured here. A lot of it is coming in somehow from overseas. Yes, I mean, it's a very difficult thing to stop that.
Yes. So a lot of it's from China and the Middle East. The United Arab Emirates seems to be the source of much of it. It's a supply and demand problem. You really have to reduce demand. Supply is really hard to stop.
Yeah.
But reducing demand, and remember many years ago there were advertisements which did a great job in lowering smoking. It just told you how dreadful smoking was for you.
Yeah.
And we sort of see it now for road accidents. We don't see it for smoking so much. But what those ads did was actually reduce demand. And this is really a demand-side problem.
Yeah, and the other side of that is the fact that all those warnings, they are not on the illegal cigarettes, and particularly with the individual warnings printed on individual cigarettes now. So it is very much in your face, and it is not present on the illicit tobacco. So anyway, we're not going to solve it here, Sean, but it is it's a fascinating and worrying story. The ASX, how did we go yesterday?
S&P ASX 200 closed up a bit, 0.3%. The materials sector did best. Property companies were worst. BHP and Rio Tinto were strong performers. More on that shortly. CSL jumped a couple of percent, while all the major banks were higher. Worst for the major caps were Gold Digger, Northern Star down nearly 4%, and Goodman Group, which was off about 2.5%.
Describing Northern Star as a gold digger always just sounds a little bit like you're having a crack at it. You mentioned that we're going to get into copper a little bit later. Let's do it now. The price of copper hit a new high, sending the share prices of BHP, Rio Tinto, and a bunch of other copper miners higher.
Copper is a bellwether commodity. Normally a high copper price means global economic confidence is pretty strong. At the moment, however, there are concerns about a tightening global supply. Now, one of the big copper producers is Glencore. It's cut its near-term output target. Everyone wants copper at the moment because we use it in electronics and electric vehicles, that type of thing. So the fact that one of the big producers is cutting its near-term output target has helped push up the price to almost $11,500 a tonne. That's about 30% higher than where they started this year. That has really been pushing, South 32, Sandfire Resources, some of those stocks on the local market. BHP has been a big beneficiary. In the last week, BHP, or last 5 trading days, BHP's up 10%. Rio Tinto's up 9%. Really driving those big miners at the moment.
Yeah, indeed. Up next, Sean, obviously we've still got plenty more show to get through. We're only partway through the mixed bag. But up after the show is Fear and Greed Q&A. Andrew Dale from ECP Management is your guest today.
Yeah, so we're talking about the big 4 banks. And basically, I ask Andrew, which is the best one to invest in? And he goes through the big 4 banks plus more is what I'd say. Plus more.
Plus more. Yeah, ECP Asset Management. That's coming up after the show. Stick around for that one. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, Australian household spending jumped 1.3% in October, twice as much as expected by economists, suggesting consumers are in fact out there spending.
It looks like it. The household spending indicator from the Bureau of Statistics replaces the retail sales figure. It's new, a little bit volatile, but this is a big jump. Even with that volatility. Annual growth surged to 5.6%. The historical average is about 4.5%. Sales and promotional periods drove the rise. The biggest increase was in consumer goods spending, stuff like clothing, footwear, furniture. What I reckon this says is that people are just getting smarter about how they shop. So, for example, many of this year's Black Friday sales began in October, in the month caught here. People are waiting for sales. They know there's going to be periods where you can get stuff cheaper. That's certainly our households like that. And they're waiting for it. Now, that stuffs up the seasonal adjustment and might take a little while for this new series to work out. What it does mean is that the economy's picking up, and it's unlikely that the Reserve Bank will be enthused about cutting rates on the back of these numbers at least.
Yeah, and the Reserve Bank Board meets next week. Most economists expect no change to the official cash rate. But according to bond markets, the following meeting, which is in February, could result in a rate increase.
It isn't the central case scenario, but bond markets have priced in a 12% possibility of a rate rise in February, a 100% chance of a rate increase sometime next year.
Okay. Defence Minister Richard Marles says he has received the Pentagon's review into AUKUS and the US is completely supportive of the project.
He sounds like Donald Trump.
Yeah, well, I suppose it has come from the US.
Project.
There we go.
Last evening, Marles, who of course is acting PM at the moment, said, "We're working through the AUKUS review and we very much thank the United States for providing it to us. What's really important here is the United States is completely supportive of AUKUS, as the President of the United States made clear, and all of us moving ahead, in his words, all of us are moving ahead, in his words, full steam." He does sound like Donald Trump. News that the Pentagon had launched a review in July prompted speculation that the White House could jettison AUKUS. Those fears dissipated after Prime Minister Anthony Albanese's visit to Washington, D.C. in October. At that time, Trump gave pretty full-sided support to AUKUS.
You know, it wouldn't surprise me if more politicians end up sounding like Donald Trump because he is such an influential communicator.
Yeah, such an effective communicator.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And the way he speaks, he cuts through. It wouldn't surprise me if that does actually start popping up in politicians on both sides. The federal government has conceded, surprise, surprise, it is unlikely to reach its ambition of building 1.2 million homes before the end of the decade. And only 2 states are likely to reach their targets for new houses.
Yes, I mean, I wrote that, but it's really the bureaucracy of the federal government and some pretty important people. In fact, the 2 most important economic bureaucrats are saying it. Head of Treasury, Jenny Wilkinson, said building 1.2 million homes by the end of 2029 would be challenging. Now, on Wednesday, Reserve Bank Governor Michelle Bullock said the country will likely miss its housing targets. At Senate estimates, Wilkinson was asked whether the government's the government's 5% deposit scheme would drive up prices only a little bit. She obfuscated. Is that a good word?
Yeah,
maybe.
Great word.
She basically said housing difficult to model. She thought there would be a small positive impact over the medium term, but, it's hard to know, blah, blah, blah. It sounded like an economist and a bureaucrat all in one, which, of course, Jenny Wilkinson is, and a very impressive one.
1.2 million homes was always a very optimistic goal, though, wasn't it?
Well, to be honest, if 3 levels of government got into line and so local government didn't have all this red tape to get through, and that's happened in some states. You're looking at me going, come on, go with me on this.
No, already you're talking about the impossible. You're talking about 3 levels of government getting into line. Right. Never going to happen.
Fair point.
Still in politics, the opposition are criticising the government over a meeting between Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke and an advocacy group pushing to repatriate Australian ISIS brides.
Acting PM Richard Marles has maintained the government did not engage in the repatriation of ISIS brides beyond what was legally required. He was commenting after reports that Burke held secret talks with advocacy group Save the Children ahead of ISIS brides being repatriated to Australia. Minutes of the talk show that Burke declined to provide formal assistance to Australians stranded in northern Syria. Sounds a little bit like a storm in a teacup, that one.
Yeah. It's the end of the year, Sean, well, rapidly approaching, which means we get all these reports showing what people buy and eat and say and what they're listening to, all of these things. Spotify was up yesterday. It released its top streaming tracks and, unsurprisingly, I suppose, overseas musicians led the way.
Number 1, Michael. Have a guess.
It's got to be Taylor Swift, right?
Yeah, it's got to be Taylor Swift. Then Drake.
Okay.
Then Morgan Wallen. Never heard of Morgan Wallen. The Weeknd and Billie Eilish. The Weeknd I definitely have heard because I bought my daughter tickets for the weekend and it was cancelled.
So a positive experience for you all.
I love the fact that he didn't make it to the country. So
you weren't even sure whether Morgan Wallen is a man or a woman.
No, I'm starting to talk about without pronouns here because I don't know who Morgan Wallen is.
Morgan Wallen is a gentleman, a country singer.
Right.
Okay, I might have gone too far. I don't know that at all. I just Googled Morgan Wallen very quickly, trying to show you up on my pop culture knowledge.
Well, the next thing, the most streamed track between January 1 and the mid-November cutoff was Ordinary. That's the name of the song by Alex Warren. I thought, Alex Warren, Ordinary. So I checked it out. Never heard the song, never heard of the person.
Really? Okay, stop. You and I work in the Nova studios every day. We sit there. That song is on all the time.
All the time?
All the time. You are in your own world half the time.
I'm focused on Fear and Greed.
Yep.
I actually had a couple of texts yesterday. I had my nephew text me, and he runs a little business, and his number 1 podcast listing was Fear and Greed, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, we had a couple of listeners yesterday tag us in posts on Instagram. So if you are one of these people who has Fear and Greed appearing very highly on your Spotify Wrapped, then please post it online and tag us. We would love to see that. That's great.
Just quickly, top Australian artist, The Wiggles.
Okay.
Followed by Kid Laroi. Top Aussie song, Riptide by Van Stewart. That's like 20 years old. And the Wiggles are like 50 years old. Anyway, personally, I got my list. I don't know, 191 genres of music. I was kind of happy about that.
That's very mixed.
Anyway, I think this is a sort of weekend edition topic, Michael.
Oh, it's got...
Can you imagine Adam? He'd be all over it.
Oh, he will have such an eclectic mix. Anyway, let's bring it up on the weekend.
Righto.
Great call. Turning to international news now, Sean, the path ahead for Ukraine peace talks is unclear, US President Donald Trump said yesterday, after what he called reasonably good talks between Russian President Vladimir Putin and US envoys.
The Kremlin said that Putin accepted some US proposals aimed at ending the war in Ukraine and was prepared to keep working to find a compromise. US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Trump advisor and son-in-law Jared Kushner spent hours at the Kremlin. I'd be trembling if I was at the Kremlin, I've got to tell you. They departed with no specific breakthrough on ending the war. Afterwards, Trump said, I quote, "What comes out of that meeting I can't tell you because it does take two to tango." Not quite sure what he meant there. Then he added, we have some pretty well worked out stuff with Ukraine is what he was talking about there. So maybe the Russians aren't tangoing, so to speak.
All right. One last one. Thailand, Sean, has temporarily lifted a decades-old ban on the sale of alcoholic drinks in the afternoons as it seeks to boost tourism.
So this is a surprise. I've been to Thailand for holidays. I've never noticed the ban.
I was going to say the same thing. I've been there, never realised. I didn't want to say anything at risk of being culturally insensitive just then, but you just blundered straight through it.
Oh, absolutely. Liquor stores, restaurants and other accredited establishments can now sell beer, wine and spirits from 2 till 5 p.m. as part of a 6-month trial. Maybe that's because, Michael, you and I, we don't drink in the afternoon, maybe.
No, respectable.
That couldn't be it. The ban, which came into force in 1972, was primarily introduced to stop government employees from drinking during working hours.
There's probably easier ways to do that.
But it's long vexed visitors to the predominantly Buddhist country, which is also known very much for its party scene. The move comes just days ahead of Christmas and the New Year holiday period, both peak seasons for tourist arrivals.
Okay, up next is Fear and Greed Q&A, as we mentioned before. Andrew Dale from ECP Asset Management. It is coming up in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au, which is also where you sign up for the free daily newsletter. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Friday, the 5th of December, 2025. Make sure you're following the podcast and join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, X, TikTok and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.